Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're setting the stage for a truly fascinating deep dive into a revolutionary 14th century mind, Ibn Khaldun. We're going to be unpacking his groundbreaking methodology of history from his famous work, the Muqaddimah. Now, this isn't just your standard look at the past. This is an absolute masterclass in how geography, biology, and the deepest metaphysics of the human soul all interact to create the rise and fall of human civilization. It's a massive, sweeping theory, and I am so excited to guide you through it. So let's jump right in.
Okay, let's dive into this. Ibn Khaldun completely flipped the script on how we understand human events with this single, really profound idea. He argues that history isn't just a surface-level recording of dates or kings or wars. No, true history is a rigorous science. It's about uncovering the hidden, underlying causes of society's movements. To really understand the what, we have to deeply investigate the how and the why of human civilization.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're starting with the science of history, then moving into climate and character, the psychology of scarcity, the spectrum of perceivers, the science of dreams, and finally, we'll cap it off with angelic knowledge. Let's start with Section 1, the science of history, focusing on the physical world.
To really grasp Ibn Khaldun's theory, we have to start with the literal geography of the Earth. He divided the inhabited world into 7 distinct climatic zones, working from the intense heat of the equator all the way up to the extreme freezing north. Now, the extremes, the incredibly hot first and second zones and the freezing sixth and seventh zones, they create really harsh living conditions, and that naturally stunts the growth of massive complex societies. But the middle, the third, fourth, and fifth zones, well, that's where it gets interesting. Because the climate there is moderate and balanced, it naturally fosters the most complex civilizations. Think of the Greeks or the Islamic Golden Age. That moderate climate fosters the greatest developments in sciences, arts, and balanced human physical characteristics.
Moving right along to Section 2, Climate and Character, and how our environment shapes our psychology.
So to understand this next piece, we need to look at an Arabic concept called akhlaq. Basically, akhlaq refers to your internal temperament, your moral character, and your overall psychological disposition. And Ibn Khaldun boldly argues that your akhlaq isn't just random. It is directly tied to the air you breathe and the physical environment you live in.
Just look at the profound difference extreme weather creates. Ibn Khaldun notes that in hot climates, like Egypt or Sudan, the physical heat literally expands what he calls the animal spirit inside the human body. This biological expansion leads to a psychological state of joy, lightness, and even a cultural quickness to dance and celebrate. But on the flip side, in cold northern climates, the freezing air contracts that exact same spirit, and this contraction causes a baseline psychology of anxiety and a deep fear of the future. It literally leads to behaviors like hoarding food for years at a time just to feel secure. I mean, it is pure environmental determinism at work.
All right, Section 3, the psychology of scarcity, looking at diet and behavior.
And this brilliantly illustrates how Ibn Khaldun turns our modern assumptions about wealth completely upside down. Today, we usually think abundance is better, right? More food, more complexity, better life. But he argues that the abundant, heavy diets of city dwellers actually produce bad humors and literal vapors in the body that rise up and cloud the brain. This leads to duller intellects and coarser physical bodies. In sharp contrast, you have the desert nomads, living in scarcity. They survive on a very simple diet. Because they aren't bogged down by all those bodily toxins, their bodies are healthier, their complexions are clearer, and their minds are incredibly sharp and perceptive.
So all of this brings us to a foundational rule of his methodology. Think of it as a chain reaction. The physical environment dictates the biological body, and the biological body dictates the sociological structure of the civilization. Okay, so now that we've got the physical, literal dirt of the earth figured out, we're going to graduate into Ibn Khaldun's metaphysics. Which takes us to Section 4, the spectrum of perceivers, focusing on the mind and soul.
Here, Ibn Khaldun maps out human perception in 3 really distinct steps. Step 1 is where practically all of us live. It's using our ordinary physical senses and basic intellect just to survive and build our societies. Then, Step 2 steps up into spiritual intuition. This is a level achieved by saints and deeply devoted scholars. And finally, Step 3 is the absolute pinnacle, the prophetic level. This is where an individual, literally, though temporarily, sheds their human nature to access the angelic realm.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is what happens at Step 2. we encounter this concept of Kashf, which literally translates to the lifting of the veil. Ibn Khaldun explains that through intense spiritual discipline, fasting, and intense inward focus, certain extraordinary minds can actually bypass their primary physical senses. When those physical senses get quieted down, the soul's inner perception wakes up, and that allows these individuals to access profound spiritual truths and witness realities that are completely beyond the physical world.
Next up is Section 5, The Science of Dreams. Glimpses of the Unseen.
This brings us to a really cool concept, ilm al-ru'ya, the science of dream interpretation. For Ibn Khaldun, a true dream isn't just your brain firing random neurons while you're asleep. Not at all. He viewed dreams as a completely valid epistemological category, which is just a fancy way of saying dreams are a perfectly legitimate way of acquiring true knowledge. It's real spiritual perception that happens when your physical body powers down for the night.
So how does that actually work? Well, the mechanics of a true dream work entirely by elimination. When you fall asleep, your physical senses, your sight, sound, touch, they all take a rest. Because your soul is no longer distracted by the loud, outside physical world, it takes all that immense focus and turns it entirely inward, towards the imagination. In this state, the soul can actually brush up against the spiritual realm. Therefore, true dreams act as this brief, fleeting bridge between our heavy physical reality and the unseen spiritual world.
And finally, Section 6, Angelic Knowledge, the ultimate peak of his framework.
To understand the peak, we have to recognize that there's a sharp, basically impenetrable boundary between us and the angels. Human knowledge, as we know, is incredibly slow. It requires time, logical deductions, gathering sensory input, and a methodical, step-by-step sequence of thought to finally arrive at a conclusion. Angelic knowledge, on the other hand, it's instantaneous. It's entirely timeless and exists completely free from the sluggish, heavy constraints of human biology.
Which naturally brings us to Wahy, or prophetic revelation. This is it, the ultimate highest form of perception possible in his whole system. Ibn Khaldun explains that Wahy requires a complete, albeit temporary, transformation. The prophet's soul has to literally shed its human limitations, crossing over to basically become angelic for a brief moment. In that state, they instantly receive divine, flawless knowledge directly from the source, before returning back to the human state to deliver that message to the rest of us.
And because this angelic realm is entirely outside of our physical concept of time, the transfer of all this immense knowledge happens all at once. To us, sitting here in the physical world, it appears to happen incredibly fast. As Ibn Khaldun brilliantly points out, there's a linguistic clue here. The very word wahi in Arabic literally implies incredible speed or haste. It's essentially a timeless download into a time-bound world. How amazing is that?
So step back and look at the grand framework we just covered. Think about this journey. Ibn Khaldun seamlessly linked the literal dirt, the intense heat, and the freezing cold of the earth to the shape and health of our biological bodies. Then he tied that to the structures of our cities and took it all the way up through the metaphysical layers of the soul, finally culminating in the highest spiritual truths of angelic knowledge. It is literally a unified theory of everything human.
Which brings us to a final thought for you to chew on. Ibn Khaldun proved over 600 years ago that we are inextricably linked to our surroundings. If our climate, our food, and our bodies fundamentally shape our character, our intellect, and the very civilization we end up building, well, I want you to look around you right now. How is your immediate environment, what you consume, the air you breathe, the spaces you inhabit, how is all of that shaping your reality, your mind, and your akhlaq today? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this sparked your curiosity to go out and learn even more.